Welcome to the Thursday night show brought to you by Football Diehards. Myself, Armando Marsal, and Bobby will talk Thursday night slate and kind of give you an overlook of what we're pretty much thinking this week as far as the Sunday slate. But before we do that, Bobby, how's it going, man?
Going pretty well. Just trying to get these showdown lineups in.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting one. There could be a lot of ways you can go here. You got two defenses that I think are respectable. So I'm not projecting a ton of points. How are you approaching this Thursday night showdown slate? What are you doing, and who are you using in the captain?
The captain, I'm kind of going two different ways. I have Tucker and I have Mixon, and I'll probably have Mixon like every one of my lineups, and Tucker in every one of my lineups. Just not.
That is actually very interesting because I really think that I think taking Tucker there might be a very unique way to approach it. You think he's going to be popular out of the captain? Because I don't.
I'm not really sure. I haven't played the captain slate, so I'm kind of just messing around, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and I actually have
answer
that. What? I'm sorry.
That's probably a horrible answer, but.
No. Hey, listen, you're being honest here, so that's the what matters. And I actually have one lineup with both of the defenses. None are in the captain. I have Joe Mixon, the captain, in that lineup, but I just feel like this is going to be a low scoring game. Vegas kind of agrees that this has a 43 over under here. The Ravens are projected to have an implied team total of 22 points, but the Bengals have an implied team total of 21. So kind of interesting to see how this plays out. I think a sneaky way to approach the captain mode is maybe going with either Javarius Allen or Alex Collins. I actually have Alex Collins in a lot of my lineups. He had a terrible week one, but it was a blowout, so I'm going to go ahead and take that with a grain of salt. What do you think of the the quarterbacks here in this game? And any in particular you like?
Flacco more than I like Dalton as of right now.
Yeah, the thing with Flacco, and Michael Fabiano pointed this out today. In 9 games in Cincinnati against the Bengals, he has scored over 10 fantasy points just once. So that's concerning to me, man. He has had no success.
Oh, maybe I shouldn't play Flacco then.
just pointed that out there. I mean,
no, that's good to know.
I had him in one of my lineups, to be honest with you, and then I started doing research, and when I heard that, I went back and I kind of looked at his game log versus the Bengals, and yeah, he's had some pretty poor performances, especially on the road here. So I don't think I'm going to be rostering him tonight. He did look sharp last week. It was against the Bills, so take that for what it's worth. But he did look a little bit better this preseason. It looked like he was getting familiar with his receiver. He has pretty much an entire new receiving core there. You got Michael Crabtree caught a touchdown last week. John Brown also caught a touchdown. Willie Snead also found the end zone. So a pretty talented group of receivers here. So I can totally see why you would consider here the Ravens or at least Joe Flacco. But yeah, I mean,
I'm maxing, so
you're going to definitely have to have exposure to him.
Flacco. What'd you say?
That you're definitely going to have exposure to Flacco if you're maxing out here. I'm only playing maybe a handful of lineups, and I think I don't have them in any right now. That might change by the time lock gets here. Any tight ends in this game? Because I think that's a way to get some uniqueness in your lineups. Any tight ends?
Max Williams, Nick Boyle. I'm probably going to be split in terms of my exposure. I don't really know. And then Eifert, I have at 25% right now.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, when Eifert's healthy, he's a threat. He's a red zone threat. And this is certainly a game where the coverage for the receivers is going to be a little tight because at the end of the day, Ravens have a pretty good secondary. And we saw Nick Boyle. He got 6 targets last week. So kind of interesting there to see that. But yeah, I mean, the tight ends here, if you're going to roll the dice, Nick Boyle, I do agree with this, a pretty decent play there. And Eifert, I do think he might get some popularity because that would be I think the general consensus of where people are going to quote unquote try to find a unique player in their lineup. What are your thoughts here on leaving a lot of money on the table when you build your roster? I have in 2 of my lineups $100 remaining salary. What do you think about that kind of construction here?
I think it works in this kind of single game slate. A lot of people say to do it in the Millionaire Maker and stuff like that, but I think numbers have shown that it really doesn't necessarily correlate to winning lineups in the Millie Maker. But on a single game, pretty much anything goes, I would say. I'm just trying to get as much usage as I can get in from skill players, and then from there, it's pretty much just trying to figure out like who's the like I like Randy Bullock tonight. I don't know how many people are going to roster him.
I have him in a couple lineups myself.
Yeah, I'm not big.
I'm trying to get different here because at least with kickers, and nothing is guaranteed, but at least with kickers, unless this game is 3-0, you're going to get some points out of them, and that's not guaranteed for some players here. So I do have interest in maybe putting in a kicker, and I think that's just a good way to find some unique, lineup construction here. Yeah. Dalton had a pretty decent game last week. I think, I was on him, in the main slate. It wasn't all that, wasn't an eye-popping game, but, 243 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. Yeah, nearly 18 DK points. This is a much tougher matchup. What are your thoughts here? Are you, you said you're maxing out, so kind of what's your exposure here to Andy Dalton?
I'm probably going to be well, I don't really know ownership, so I can't tell you if I'm going to be with, above, or below the field, but I feel like I'll be below the field because I like the kickers better in this game than I do the quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's weird because I'm kind of leaning the same way. Like I mentioned before, I have one of the lineups with two defenses just because I do think this is low scoring game. I mentioned the over under being 43 points. A lot of the money is going on the over. I'm going to keep an eye on that because then, I might just make some last minute adjustments. But it's a situation where I do have some exposure to obviously to Dalton because I think it's not. But I do agree with you. To me, I'm going to be under the field here. It's just one of those things where I don't think it's going to be a high scoring game. I actually like maybe stacking running backs from both sides in this game. It is worth noting though, that in his last game at Baltimore, Andy Dalton had a pretty decent game. He threw for 3 touchdowns and 222 yards. But aside from that, the game before, he just had an Andy Dalton type game, 170 yards, 0 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So very difficult to kind of gauge what he's going to do. I do like this offense much better than his offense last year. I think this is an improved offensive line as well. So there's a lot of good things to like here. But then there's also the fact that this is a tough Baltimore Ravens defense. So, what else do you think here with this game? Like, what are your thoughts? Do you project this to be low scoring? Any running backs in particular that, are popping out of you? I'm going back to the Alex Collins. Well, I do think that a lot of his issues last week was that this game was fully out of control and they didn't need to play him. And also the fact that he fumbled early and, kind of just, coaches, kind of trying to say, hey, listen, do you fumble? You're going to get the bench. So I don't think that anyone should be concerned here for Alex Collins. So give me your thoughts there on that running back situation. Huh?
Unless he fumbles again.
Well, yeah, but we can't be predicting fumbles, can we?
I don't know. It's just he has issues in the past, so I just wouldn't.
I did say that a good way to go unique here is Javoris Allen. Buck Allen to me.
I have Buck Allen ahead of Collins. In terms
of I have him too. I have both of them. I'm not scared to go back there. We expected Collins to be the workhorse in this offense, so that doesn't change my that 1 week performance doesn't change my mind in a blowout situation because I think a lot of things could have factored to that decision. What give me some other things here you're thinking on Monday night before we start talking about maybe a little bit about the main slate and kind of our approach for the main slate this weekend.
I like Tyler Boyd, just in terms of someone who everyone probably jump on John Ross and Boyd might go low owned. As pretty much on a 1-game slate, I don't really know how low owned a player can actually go, but I think he could be pretty sneaky, I would say. I think he outsnapped him and had more receptions in week 1, so something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and you got to kind of think about like roster construction when you're taking ownership into consideration. Most people aren't willing to leave a ton of money on the table, and rostering someone like Tyler Boyd, you're probably going to leave some good chunk of change here on the table unless you max out. So and there are ways to max out, but if you leave some money on the table and you have someone like Boyd in your roster, I think that alone is going to be a pretty unique lineup considering you're playing a one-game slate. I'm pretty sure that there is going to be an identical lineup to you, but I don't think there's going to be many. So I do think that that's a pretty good approach there. I try to make a lineup that I'm not excited about, and I just feel like, okay, I'm not excited about it. That's unique. So I'm going to go ahead and play it, and I take the whole game script into consideration here. So there is a lineup I have with 2 kickers in it. I'm not excited about that, man. I really am not, because I do think I'm probably
the 2 kicker strategy. I have a lot of 2 kickers, so
I think you are limiting upside, like at the end of the day, because how much upside does a kicker really have? But to me, it's just a way, to get creative, to get unique, and then not only that, when you look at this game, there's we're talking about a potential low-scoring game, and it could be a battle of the kickers here. So I think that's a pretty interesting approach. I'm glad that you're on board with it, because I thought you were going to just tell me, what the hell are you doing, doing 2 kickers? So I'm glad that you're on board with it. I also like the 2 defenses here, and just playing running backs. I really think this is going to be a slow-paced game. I have been wrong before, but if I have to envision this game, I'm going to see just 2 defenses going at it, the run game in full effect, and not a ton going on through the air.
Yeah, no, I think the 2 kickers is pretty interesting, especially how low scoring these Thursday night games have been. We've seen in the past, so I'm not against 2 kickers at all. I think that's a pretty good way to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I agree there, and
especially if you're not high on the quarterbacks. The thing is, both these defenses are funneled. They're going to funnel to the pass, so that's something that I'm a little bit nervous about in terms of my exposure. I think I want to figure out some stuff. They both should funnel. That's what not having AJ Green enough in the captain spot's probably not something I'm too excited about.
I think the popular choice is going to be Mixon. I think right behind him, it'll be AJ Green. There's just a lot of, popular. He's very popular. He's a popular player. And so I think, name recognition right there will just add a couple of percentages to the ownership. So that's, as far as the Thursday night game, I think we broke it down pretty good. We both agree this is going to be a pretty low scoring game. We both think that, we like the kickers. Over. I'm sorry?
Watch it go way over.
Listen, it's Thursday night, man. Anything can happen.
So hopefully,
it has gone down. Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on it. It's moved down half a point. But my concern here is just a ton of the betting is on the over. So, what I'm asking myself is, what are we missing? Yeah,
it might be missing a lot if that's the case.
Yeah, right now on Fantasy Labs, you got the 61%. It says here that the bets are on the over. So I think that's something to kind of consider there when you're creating these lineups.
Change up my build a little bit, I would say.
Huh?
Makes me kind of want to change up my build.
Yeah, I could totally see why you would want that. But you're maxing out, so the good thing about that is you can go totally different in maybe a quarter of your lineups, and then keep it to where you were thinking at 75% of your lineups. And if you're right and you get a one of those lineups that's pretty underowned, you might hit gin or might hit line in the bottle, which is what you're looking for in these one game slates.
Yeah. No, I'm waiting. Let's get into Sunday.
Yes, let's get into Sunday slate. We basically broke the entire slate last night, the entire main slate. We broke it down last night in the podcast, the Chalk Talk podcast. You and I went, pretty much in depth. After the podcast, we immediately said we forgot to talk about 2 guys. So I'm just going to open it up right now to that. And we forgot to talk about the San Francisco 49ers backfield. You got Matt Breida and you got Alfred Morris back there against the Lions that just was awful last week against the Jets run defense. or against the Jets running backs. I'm sorry. Give me your thoughts here. Both are extremely cheap. Matt Breida at 4,800 on DraftKings. Alfred Morris 3,600 on DraftKings.
Yeah, no, I like Alf. Fumbled on the goal line twice, but just an interesting situation when you see what Crowell did. Breida's probably not a bad play. I don't know how much of him I will have. It's just Crowell's so cheap, and he makes it so you can kind of team jam him in if you want to play that game. So I'm not – I was talking about Morris at his price. I think he's like 36 or 3,800, so I think it's a pretty solid play.
Yeah, it's one of those situations that when you saw what the Jets backfield was able to do against this Lions defense, it just makes it a very interesting situation here. It's tough to decipher which of the two you want to start because I do think they're going to split the ball here quite a bit in this backfield. So it is an interesting.
Well, I think St. Fran's winning the game, so I'm probably going to be Alf, right?
Yeah, they're actually 6-point favorites. The line jumped 3 points, which is very interesting to me. Their total jumped half a point here. So the over under is it had jumped half a point as well. So pretty interesting spot if you ask me.
Which way? The line opened at 3 and jumped to 6?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, I like Alf a lot then.
Yeah. And they're getting the Niners are getting 69% of the bets against the spread. And the over is 75% bet. So pretty interesting situation. I agree. I think, Alfred Morris would probably be the guy that benefits the most from that type of game script. The problem here is just I don't think he has that big of a ceiling. I think Breida's, obviously the higher ceiling back, but I think game script is really going to favor Alfred Morris here. So I wanted to kick off with that because, immediately once we got off, we both said, man, we really forgot to talk about that game. And I think it's a very interesting game. So we talked about pretty much a lot of games. Let's talk about the popular game again. We mentioned the Steelers hosting KC, the highest over under of the slate. It's at 53.5. The Steelers have a 29 implied team total. The Chiefs have a 24.5 implied team total. This is only a 4.5 point spread favored by the Steelers here. Give me your thoughts on this game. I know that there's going to be a lot of core plays for you out of this contest, and it's a game that I think you need to have exposure to this weekend because it should be a high scoring game here.
Yeah, I like Juju. I like AB, obviously. And I like James Conner. I think that he's in another smash spot. I think he got a $1,700 increase, but I'm still going to play him at $6,700 just because that's Lev Bell usage in that game. Roethlisberger's kind of he made his way to the injury report, so not saying that he's actually hurt or it's going to affect his play, but who knows if he is, they might lean on Conner more, and I just think there's a ton of value there, so I'll probably be above the field.
Yeah, and I dug into this game a little, even more so today because I did the Stack 'em Up article for Football Diehards, and it's now live on the site. But this is my top stack this week without a doubt. You got Big Ben 6,900. He looked terrible in week 1. He was on the road though, where he really does far worse throughout his career, where he plays far worse, and now he's at home against one of the worst secondaries in the league. They came into the season ranked 28th by Pro Football Focus. And they were the third worst as far as DVOA was concerned last year. So certainly a situation that I think Big Ben could bounce back on. I was just on SiriusXM with Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey, and they asked me about him. So really big game I'm expecting out of him. This defense surrendered over 400 passing yards last week to Phillip Rivers. So great bounce back spot. I do like Juju Smith-Schuster, and I like his price, but he's expected to be covered by Kendall Fuller, who's graded pretty good at Pro Football Focus, and it is one of those things where he has that slate breaking upside, he has that speed, he has that big playability. But I think I'm going to keep it simple here. I think I'm going to pair up Big Ben with Antonio Brown in a phenomenal matchup for him. It's just he has one of the highest advantage ratings of the week. It's just and he's one of the most consistent receivers that we've seen year in year out for many years now. and when you look at what he did last week, he had 16 targets. I think that went overlooked because of James Conner's performance, but Brown was peppered with 16 targets. He's still the receiver here. He's going to get high volume each and every week, and the upside is just through the roof. And I think that 8,800 price tag is very fair for what he is. And you mentioned, going back to James Conner, I agree with you. I think James Conner is a very sharp play this week. I think he's going to be pretty popular again, but that's fine. The usage is there. The game flow is it's not going to affect him. When you look at his involvement in the passing game, you just got to like it, So even in tough run matchups, I think someone like James Conner is going to have a nice floor because of his ability to catch passes out of the backfield. So a game I'm very, very excited about. On the other side, I think someone like Kareem Hunt is just too underpriced. I am concerned, like we mentioned yesterday in the podcast, I am concerned that he wasn't as involved in the passing game in week 1. I'm going to go ahead and just chalk it up as one of those things that it just happens in an outlier game. I do think that eventually Mahomes will start checking it down to him. He's just too good of a running back to produce these kind of numbers on a weekly basis. So at 6,200, I really do think that even if they are chasing points, he's going to be involved. Let's not talk about Tyreek Hill because we already know how good he is. We already know what he's able to do. I know you like him quite a bit. His price went up here. What are your thoughts, on the other side of this ball, the Chiefs side of the ball? Where are you looking at?
Mahomes is really looking at him in that San Diego game, so the price increase doesn't really scare me. Chiefs side of the ball, and even talking about Big Ben, like Big Ben and Mahomes, I don't know how much exposure I'm going to have just because the DK pricing algorithm seems like it's obviously weighing defensive matchups versus quarterbacks, and you have guys in I think would probably be better spots in their ancillary weapons going up against defenses, and they're like significantly underpriced. Talking about like the Patriots players and the Packers players, so I still haven't figured out like who exactly I'm using in tournaments at quarterback, but the guys in this game that I'm probably using, I'm probably just going with Tyreek, Juju, AB, and Connor as of right now.
Yeah, I can totally
possibly.
I think Kelsey's in a good spot here. I really do. I think he's going to be pretty bounce back. I think this is a good bounce back position for him. I still think that there are some issues in the middle of the field here for the Steelers. It's not a complete vulnerability of theirs, but I do think that, they can improve in that department. So I do think Kelsey has the potential here to have a nice game. So talk about quarterbacks. You said you don't know who your tournament quarterbacks are right now. Do you have your cash game quarterbacks?
Well, I think Garoppolo. Locked out? I'm going back to the well with Garoppolo. Him and Luck I'm looking at in tournaments. I actually even kind of like Sam Darnold a little bit for tournaments. Just if you want to get on Team Jam a Man, it kind of works. I think there's a sneaky play in that game. That's pretty much as of right now, like Darnold, Garoppolo, Luck, and maybe one of Brady or Rodgers probably in my builds. I don't know. I haven't really gone into it like in terms of like actually building lineups. I've just kind of done research. So,
yeah, I think one player I'm going back to this week as far as the quarterback position is concerned is Case Keenum. I think it's a really soft matchup against the Raiders defense that just looked really bad last week. And they came into the season ranked, 24th as far as secondary is concerned. So definitely a vulnerable position, a vulnerable part of their defense. He's only 5,800. He threw 39 times last week. Maybe that's going to be a little high. Maybe if this game gets out of hand, they won't be throwing as much, but I still think he has a good shot to, throw at least 30 passes. He threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So he looked like he was in sync with his receivers. Last week, we saw Emmanuel Sanders have a big game, 135 yards, with 10 receptions and a touchdown. He was targeted 11 times. You got Demaryius Thomas, who was targeted 10 times. He came down with 6 catches, 63 yards, a touchdown. Both of these receivers have really, really good matchups. If you ask me, we talked about this on the podcast yesterday. I really like Thomas in this situation quite a bit. So Keenum to me is one of my core plays as far as quarterbacks is concerned. And I'm kind of starting to gain interest here in Alex Smith. Very good matchup at home, against the Colts. Last week they were playing with a lead, and he still attempted 30 passes. So Something to be, kind of noticed there with Alex Smith, and he has plenty of weapons there, and a good pass catcher out of the backfield. And I agree with you. I do think Andrew Luck is an interesting play this week, so I'm expecting the Colts to put up some points. So if that's the case, I do expect, Smith to be a little bit more involved this week here. Any interest in Alex Smith at 6K?
I think he's interesting. I think he's interesting if you pair him with like Josh Doxson and Jordan Reed, just because of how soft that Indy defense is, and he's probably going to be low owned.
Yeah, I even don't mind going, with him and Jamison Crowder quite a bit. He was disappointing last week. He didn't get a ton of the target share. I think it was just 4 targets last week. But this is, they were playing with the lead, so maybe they didn't need to use him. Yeah. I know they utilized some of the other guys. They didn't use Jordan Reed a ton. Chris Thompson did see a ton of passes out of the backfield, so I do think he's going to be involved in the passing game here quite a bit. So I just have interest in him. I agree with you in Jimmy Garoppolo. I think a bounce back game is in order. I do expect him to come in and just annihilate this Detroit Lions defense. We talked about another quarterback, last night from your neck of the woods, arguably the GOAT, and his name is Tom Brady. He's playing against Jacksonville. It is a terrible matchup. It is. But when you're talking about quarterbacks of that caliber, sometimes they can outplay the matchup. Give me your thoughts on him. Pretty cheap over at DraftKings. And I know that, you mentioned that that's going to be probably a good way to be contrarian in your lineups come this weekend. Yeah, so they don't really have a running back that can actually pound the football at this point. So you got to wonder how many times he's going to throw the ball in this game. And at 6,500, if he's thrown it 45 to 50 times, he can easily pay off that salary, and he's going to come in at low ownership. I like a lot of his weapons more than him. I like going to James White if Burkhead's out. If Burkhead's in, I like both of them, but probably not as much as I would if James White was just by himself. I like Chris Hogan at 5,200. That's very that price decrease from 6 is. In the Patriots offense is just, he's like someone you have to roster, I guess, at that price, especially if he gets the slot. If he is running out of the slot, he's going to avoid Jalen Ramsey. And I'm wondering if Ramsey may cover Gronk, because I remember being at the game last year, and I think Ramsey was in coverage versus Gronk. So if that happens, it could divert coverage from. It could allow Hogan to get open, and he maybe steals those. Amendola had a big game from the slot versus in the AFC Championship, so if Hogan's there, he could also. I like Dorsett as well. Yeah, and we mentioned, in the podcast yesterday, which, I talked a little bit about Hogan lining up. This is including last year as well. These are numbers between last year and the first game of the season. He's lined up 47% of the pre-snaps in the slot, and that's a place where Ramsey only goes 9% of the time. In fact, I'm looking now, and he's now expected to be covered by DJ Hayden. So I don't think he's going to get a ton of Ramsey, if any at all, in this game. So I do think he makes for a sneaky, a start as well at a very cheap price. And we know Bill Belichick, he likes to switch things up. Last week he showcased Philip Dorsett. I wouldn't be surprised if the Jacksonville Jaguars are preparing for him and for Gronk, and we just see a ton of usage here for Hogan when no one really is expecting it. You know how he is. When people bob, he weaves, and that's how it is. He prepares really well for games. So you just never know. It's a very tricky situation, but I do think Hogan is far more talented than what he showcased last week, and at this price, I think there's plenty of upside to be had here for him. Let's talk a little bit about the running back position. I do think it's an interesting one this week. We mentioned it yesterday when we spoke. You were between Alvin Kamara and Todd Gurley. Alvin Kamara is at home against Cleveland. I believe they're 10-point favorites here if it hasn't moved up. Yeah, there are 10-point favorites here at home in a really good matchup. The Browns are decent against the run, but we talked about how good Alvin Kamara is catching passes out of the backfield. So there's really no worry when he's up against a tough defense. And then you got Gurley, just the usage is through the roof. He's in a better spot. He's at home. He's actually that team is the highest The Rams are the highest favorites here at 13.5 points. What are your thoughts on the two top running backs, and what direction are you going to be going?
I like Gurley. I like him a little bit more than Kamara. He's going to be at a little less ownership. He's an 11-point favorite. I think a lot of people are going to chase Kamara. I'll definitely have Kamara, but I'd rather go with Gurley, Connor, and maybe McCaffrey to kind of leverage that the people are going to chase Kamara.
Okay,
I'm still going to have Kamara in tournaments, but if I had to choose between the two, I like Gurley more than Kamara. I think Connor had like 10 more touches than Kamara last week, so you get him at a $2,800 discount from Kamara. So I feel like he's better to have as my second running back. I can use the money elsewhere.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I mean, Connor had 36 touches last week. That's just pretty absurd. And you are getting a discount here. I like going back to both Kamara and Connor this week quite a bit. You know, McCaffrey's in a pretty good spot. The Falcons are dealing with some injuries there in the middle of the field, which are going to hurt their chances to be able to contain McCaffrey, I think, here. So I do think, you know, even at that $7K price tag, he's fine. I think he offers a nice floor. We talked about, briefly about David Johnson. And it's just the talent is there. The ownership is going to be very low. These are kind of the situations you look, but it's just the matchup is not a good one. He's now dealing with an injury, and it's just a situation where it doesn't make a ton of sense to play him. There's just so many better options that are not going to be that highly owned beneath him, and then you got the two top running backs above him as well. So I mentioned to you Gordon. It's a great matchup. It seems like it's going to set up like a perfect game script for him. You brought up an excellent point that they're traveling from the West to East Coast, so there is some concern there. But I know you're not a fan of him. I'm not a huge fan of him either. But is there a way, where you feel that Gordon should be locked up in these cash games at least this week?
Yeah, you can roster him in cash. I'm not going to do that. He's burned me a couple times, so I'm not going to roster him in cash. I think I'd rather team jam him in, especially with the value you get with these Green Bay and Patriots players. I think you can kind of exploit that, or even like Mohamed Sanu in the Atlanta game.
Yeah, I can totally see that. You brought up Dalvin Cook up to my attention last night. I did a little bit more homework on him. And I agree with you. I think his involvement in the passing game is something not to disregard here. And I can totally see him have a pretty good game against the Packers. And I do think that this game script and this game flow is going to benefit him regardless of what way it goes. So I wasn't too excited about that last night when we talked in the podcast. But the more and more I look into it and the more I think about it, the more I like him.
What's he at for his price?
$6,500. I think that's a very fair price for him. And I think he certainly has a decent ceiling there at that price tag. I think there's plenty of room for him to smash that price to pieces, to be honest with you.
No, I like Dalvin. Yeah, I think that game's going to go low on and it could be a shootout. So I like the quarterbacks in that game better than I like the quarterbacks in Pitt and Kansas City.
Yeah. I mean, that's So you think that that's a better spot to get the quarterbacks in Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, just because of like how Bill's going, I can get Garoppolo, and I can use. Well, I'm talking about. I just like the quarterback. I think that game has like a lot. Is going to have half the ownership, and I think that it could be a shootout.
I think a decision. And okay, I'm sorry. You were saying?
No, Kirk Cousins and Rodgers. Like, I take them over Patrick Mahomes and Ben Roethlisberger. I don't really care what the total is. I think they're just better quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think that's a great
funnels to the pass, and the Vikings will funnel to the pass because obviously Rodgers is Rodgers. So I don't know. I think Rodgers can outscore them at the price, but I'm not just talking about the quarterbacks. I'm more talking about like Allison, Cobb, Adams, Graham, those aren't kind of the guys that I'd be on. I'd probably be more on the Minnesota side with Diggs, like you said, Dalvin Cook, Thielen, or in the Pats game, talking about Hogan, Dorsett, James White. Like, I can get to those guys, use a guy like Jimmy or Andrew Luck, and then get in AB or Gurley. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's a viable strategy there. A lot of people, I think, are going to be deciding between playing someone like Chris Thompson or Adrian Peterson out of this backfield. What way are you leaning, if any way at all, here?
Chris Thompson or Peterson?
Yeah, or Adrian Peterson. It's they have the Colts at home in a really, really good matchup. Thompson is 5,900. Peterson is 5,500.
Well, I think they might end up playing from behind, so I don't hate Thompson. I just don't like his price. Like, I'd rather go down to James White. I'd rather go down to Breida. Rather go down to Alf, especially with that line movement.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I'm probably going to be staying away from that range. If I had to choose, though, between the two running backs, I lean more towards Chris Thompson. I'm not expecting AP to get 26 carries every week, and his per carry per touch production wasn't all that eye popping to me. Someone I like, that's a little bit lower price than those two running backs quite a bit, and I mentioned him yesterday. It's Dion Lewis. I just think he's going to be very involved in this Titans offense. Now with Delaney Walker out, it's also a very interesting situation for me for Dion Lewis. I do think, we saw the Pats running backs catch 10 passes out of the backfields for over 70 yards. So this is a matchup I think Lewis could exploit. He received 8 targets last week. He carried the ball 16 times. He found the end zone. His role, I think, is pretty much solidified. I had my doubts heading into the season on how they were going to use him, but I think it's going to be more game script than anything. But this is another game script where I think the Titans can be chasing points. And considering how beat up they are now, I can see that being the case for at least the next several weeks. What are your thoughts here on a Dion Lewis at 5K over at DraftKings?
No, I like Dion. I get what you're saying in terms of like being the pass catching running back, especially with J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney coming off the edges. I think there's a couple interesting pieces in that game, whether it's Jonnu Smith or Corey Davis, who you brought to my attention last night. Yeah, I think it's a good pivot. I like that game, Watson Hopkins, Tennessee funnels. So you could game stack that game. I don't think I'm going to go in that direction, but I wouldn't fault you for doing that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be game stacking here. I do like Dion Lewis in this matchup. I do like you mentioned. We talked about Corey Davis. He's now a little hurt, so that might I might have to steer away from him. Sticking on here to the running backs, Isaiah Crowell. I mentioned him to you yesterday when we spoke, and I like him quite a bit against the Dolphins defense that to me is not that good defending the run. They allowed nearly 100 rushing yards, last season, and in week 1 they would have allowed easily 150 rushing yards to the Titans if it wasn't because Derrick Henry had a 50-plus run called back due to a holding. So Crowell only touched the ball 10 times last week. Did score 2 touchdowns, 102 yards. I'm not expecting that type of efficiency, but I do expect that this could be a game where he sees a little bit more volume in a potential game script that's a little bit more favorable for him this week. So I do like him. He's 4,600. I don't think he's going to garner a ton of ownership. I do agree with you. James White to me is a very interesting play. He's consistent. He's reliable. And, the Patriots really, really have confidence in this running back. We see it pretty much year in and year out, especially in the playoffs when it counts the most. So I do like that call quite a bit. And, I do think he is going to be chalky. So I don't know how much exposure I'll have of him in tournaments, but I'll definitely in cash games this week be considering him quite a bit. If you're kind of like dumpster diving down there, someone I am considering, and I think it's just he's going to have a role on this team because of how bad the defense is, and they're probably going to be playing catch up quite a bit, is Jalen Richard. He received 11 targets last week, 9 receptions, 55 yards. He only carried the ball 5 times. He's not going to be involved in the run game. He's 3,400 on DraftKings, though. He is playing against a Denver defense that is very tough to beat on the outside. They have very good outside coverage, but the middle is a little weak. So I think they're going to attack this game just like they attacked the Rams, throwing it to Jared Cook and throwing it to Jalen Richard when they're trying to chase for points here. So I do like him as a dart throw here in tournaments. He's not going to be consistent. There is a very low floor, but at 3,400, I think you can get some nice returns on your investment if this game goes as I anticipated to go, where they're chasing points. What are your thoughts here? I know you have Alfred Morris up there when it comes to running backs this low, but do you have any interest here in Richard?
No, yeah, especially with the targets he got last week and how Denver's going to kind of funnel to the pass. I don't think Lynch is going to be able to run really well versus that team. So if they're playing from behind and he's seen targets like that last week, I don't know why he wouldn't see them this week. So
yeah, I think with him, it's not some
player pool. Yeah,
he's not in your player pool.
No, he is.
Okay. Yeah, and that's just something where it's not like you're going all in on him by any means. It's just you're running a ton of lineups, and having these kind of players in your player pool, I think, makes sense because you'll find unique builds to your lineups. And it's we talk about fading the chalk and stuff like that. And you know, a lot of the lineups, winning lineups, have chalk. They're chalk for a reason. You just got to find unique ways to be different. And I think, you know, maybe including someone like Richard with that kind of possible performance at a very cheap price is a good way to find uniqueness in your lineups. Any other running backs that are standing out? We'll talk some receivers next, but any other running backs here that are standing out to you?
Not really. I think we pretty much covered it.
So the receiving position is very interesting. We've already talked about a couple of receivers throughout the show. We have Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, and Julio Jones as the top 3 price receivers. DeAndre Hopkins right behind them. They're all 8K or above. What do you like in this range? Are you paying up for any of these receivers? If so, which one are you planning to roster this week?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry. Just trying to fix something in my lineup.
No, that the 8K receivers, you have Hopkins, Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, and Antonio Brown. What direction are you going?
I think Hopkins and Brown. I'd start with Brown over Hopkins.
Okay. Yeah, and we talked a little bit about Brown when we were talking about that game. I just think he's a fine play, regardless of who it is that he's playing, and this is just a phenomenal matchup. DeAndre Hopkins expected to see coverage by Malcolm Butler. It's still a matchup he has a very high advantage rating in, so I do like him quite a bit. If I'm not playing Brown, though, I'm probably not going to be paying up in this range because I am trying very hard to fit in Kamara in my lineups, and it's very difficult to pay up for one of these receivers and also Kamara, especially with the rest of my roster construction. I'm kind of looking lower.
McCaffrey, right?
I'm sorry?
That's why you can go McCaffrey, right?
You can go McCaffrey, actually. You could. I'm interested in Keenan Allen. I really, really am interested. I still think he's underpriced. I think, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see him in that 8K range, like we see some of these other guys. It's just when Allen is healthy, he's so productive. Rivers just looks at him pretty much in every play. Even if he doesn't throw to him, he's looking at Allen. What are your thoughts here? It's at Buffalo, a really, really soft matchup for him, one that he should completely destroy. He is expected to see Taron Johnson, who is below average cornerback, according to Pro Football Focus. And Allen has actually the second highest advantage rating of the week. I want to get some Allen shares this week into my lineups. I just don't know how much I'm going to be able to fit. What are your thoughts here?
With Keenan?
Yeah.
I like Keenan. I like him every week. I just don't know if I'm going to have much from this week.
Okay. And then let's just move on down, to a couple of these guys. How do you feel about, guys like Golden Tate, these PPR guys like, Golden Tate, Jarvis Landry, Emmanuel Sanders coming off a big performance? I'm sorry?
I like Galladay in that game a lot.
Oh, you like Galladay in this game, in the Detroit game?
Yeah.
Really? So you think that target share is going to be consistent? I know he's 4,800 and there's a huge ceiling, but I do think he's the most talented receiver on the team. I do agree with that, but I just don't know if he's going to get that consistent volume. You think that that's going to be consistent on a week-to-week basis?
With Sherman on Marvin Jones, and if they're playing from behind, it has to go somewhere, right?
And how about Golden Tate?
Golden Tate's another one. I like Golden a lot too.
Yeah, he's 6,500. I have some interest in him. I think he's going to continue being Matthew Stafford's go-to guy here. So this is kind of where I'm looking at. This is my range of receivers. I still have interest in Diggs. I mentioned Golden Tate. I think Jarvis Landry is a very interesting play this week. We saw him 15 targets last week. This New Orleans defense, I mentioned it to you yesterday. I really don't know if they're the real deal, like we saw, or as good as we saw last year, or they're a little bit more like what we saw at the beginning of this year. I know you say you lean towards them being better than what we saw in week one. I tend to agree, but I still don't know how good they really are. So I have interest in Landry simply because of the volume. I think that volume is going to continue. I think they're going to be chasing points. So I do like him here quite a bit. Give me your thoughts on someone like a Nelson Aguilar who didn't have a great fantasy performance in week one, but did get 10 targets and come down with 8 receptions. The only problem is only 33 yards.
Yeah, no, I like the Bucs D in that game. I'm waiting for Nick Foles to become Nick Foles. Hopefully it'll happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, there's totally that chance that he does become Nick Foles. We saw that Nick Foles in week one. It's a tricky situation. I do think the targets are going to be there, though, for Aguilar, so I do expect him to at least present a pretty nice floor. I mentioned Demaryius Thomas earlier. I like him a ton. I think this is a great matchup. I also like Cooper Kupp at 5,500 quite a bit. It just appears that he's going to be a consistent target of Jared Goff, regardless of matchup. Last week, 9 targets. He's found the end zone. I believe it was 27% of the target share here for the week one. And so I do think he's going to be heavily involved. I like them coming into the season, and I like what I saw in week one. I like that chemistry. We already touched up on Chris O'Hogan here. Give me your thoughts on maybe one receiver under the 5K range that you're looking into, that you're considering, aside from Kenny Golladay.
I like Anunwa and Sanu.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting call. I do think that Ryan Grant call is a good one. He had 9 targets last week, caught 8 of those. He's going to have a role in this offense. You and I have talked about this. He's going to have a role. He's very talented. And there's just, he's the number 2 receiver in a pass-first offense. They don't have a really strong running game. Even if Marlon gets back, it's not a strong running game by any means. So I do think that that's a pretty good call. I think that's he's going to go under own here. I like the Anunwa call. I do think the matchup might be a little bit tougher than what we saw him have last week. Anyone else down here? I'm really not going down here too much this week. I don't think it's necessary. I do think that, Chris Godwin would be an interesting selection if Deshaun Jackson were to be limited or end up sitting out. He did practice today, so I don't think he will sit out. But he did practice today, and I do think he's going to play. Any interest there? Because I do have one more guy that I will talk about.
You like Goodwin at all? If he gets a full clean bill of health.
Well, it's funny because the receiver I was going to talk to you about is in this game. No, I don't think he's going to play. I really don't think he's going to play. But from what I've been reading, it just there's not a lot of optimism regarding his status. Who?
So you like Pettis?
Yep, I do like Dante Pettis. 5 targets last week. He was on the field quite a bit. It's an interesting situation. He's 4K. If we like Jimmy Garoppolo, I think everyone's going to be pairing him up with George Kittle in this matchup. And Pettis might go, a little on their own. I don't think he's a name that a lot of people know of or a lot of people recognize. And sometimes when someone doesn't know a player, they're not going to play him because there is some hesitation there. So I think that's an interesting spot. I really am trying to track this Marquise Goodwin, situation very closely. But if he does sit out, I think I'm going to be, so a little bullish on Pettis. The good thing is we have a Sunday morning show, you and I, that we talk, and we'll have all the updated news. So we'll be able to kind of dig in a little bit more on Pettis, to see where we're at here. I think we broke down the receiver position pretty well there. Let's move on to the tight ends here. Gronk is at top. Are you going to be investing in Gronk at all this weekend?
Oh, I like Gronk. I like Gronk a lot. But I just don't know how much I'm going to have of him. I think just 7K is kind of steep, and I see that. I don't know. I feel like you can go other places.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we, briefly mentioned that when you and I, chatted yesterday, we briefly mentioned that this could be a 2 tight end week. Are you still feeling that way, considering some of the value plays that we've talked about and potential value that's opening up, like with someone like Pettis?
I don't think I'm going that way in cash anymore.
I agree. It was an initial overview, and I don't think, considering some of the things that are going on, you got James White now, pretty much going to see a ton of action. I think you got that Goodwin situation that's, worth monitoring. So I don't think so. I still like, Jordan Reed quite a bit, though. He's someone that to me is, so long as he's healthy and so long as he's this cheap, he's 5K. There's just so much upside to be had here. I think he's still underpriced considering the matchup and considering his talent. He found the end zone last week. Like I mentioned, he only got 5 targets, but that's fine. I think the game script was working against him there. So I do think he's going to be just fine. George Kittle, I have a ton of interest here. I do think if you're going to pair up Garoppolo, the best way to do it is with George Kittle. He received 9 targets last week. And I just think that this young tight end is very, very talented, very athletic. And this is just one of those matchups that I think he can really, really pay off that low salary of $3,800 on DraftKings. Give me some thoughts here on Kittle and maybe some other tight ends that you're kind of looking towards this week.
Yeah, I was on Kittle last week. Just missed a couple big plays with that Garoppolo Kittle sack. I'm probably going to go back to the well.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I think Neil Sterling, the tight end for the Jets, is interesting versus Miami at 2,500.
You've mentioned that name to me quite a bit. You mentioned to me off air, text, all that stuff.
And any passes this week? But
no, because I didn't have him in my player pool, and like for some reason now, like I'm kind of like looking into him. I don't know how that's going to work out there, but I like someone else in that price range, and I mentioned it to you yesterday. Ricky Seals-Jones. I just think that the Rams are so good on the outside coverage, and the way to kind of try to gain some yard and try to attack this defense is in the middle. We saw the Raiders do it last week with Jared Cook. Ricky Seals-Jones is a very athletic tight end, very pretty good at pass catching. He did drop a touchdown pass last week, which kind of hurts what he did. He was targeted 6 times, caught 3 of those for 19 yards. But I still think at 2,900, and considering this is a team that is totally expected to be chasing points here, he is very interesting. I like David Njoku, especially if we think that this is going to be a shootout here. He wasn't that productive in his first game. 13 yards, three catches, but he was targeted 7 times. So I do think game script here will favor him. And I'm going to go back to the Jared Cook. I played the afternoon late slate last week, and I had some Jared Cook. I don't expect him to be as productive on a week-to-week basis, but I just think that this is a very similar situation like we saw last week, where he's facing a defense where it might be a little bit more vulnerable in the middle of the field. What do you think about the chalk Cook this week? Because I think he is going to be very, very chalky at this low price.
Yeah, I like the Cook call. I would definitely have some Cook. I think he didn't even get a price increase because the game was on Monday night, right? So yeah,
no.
3,800. Yeah, especially versus Denver. I usually stream tight ends versus Denver, so I have no issue with it.
Yeah, even at a higher ownership, I think that he's a viable option. You had mentioned Vance McDonald. You're still on Vance McDonald. He's practicing. It doesn't look like he's going to miss this game. What are your thoughts here? Do you think he's going to be able to just come in and shake off that rust and have a big game against the Chiefs defense here?
Tight ends to kind of go elsewhere, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's someone to keep an eye on because he is usually cheap, and I think we'll have a good role here in this offense. But not someone I'm targeting this week. No one else for me really. My player pool consists of, as far as tight ends, is Ricky Seals-Jones, David Njoku, Jared Cook, Kittle, and Jordan Reed. I will have my Kelsey lineups, but I don't think I'm going to have as much exposure as I would like with Kelsey, because I was planning on using him much more in the flex position than I wanted to put him at my tight end position this week. But my roster construction has been changing quite a bit. So before we get
up my build for this showdown.
That what?
I totally messed up my build for this showdown.
Why? What'd you do?
I'm just having trouble getting my export and everything out.
Oh no. Well, we're almost done. We're wrapping up here, so you'll have 20 minutes.
I don't even think I'm going to get it done. I think I might have to just roll one
across the board.
Yeah,
Max Center.
Get that. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck I just did.
Oh man, just I would manually just change some.
Yeah.
Before we get off, let's talk a little bit about defenses here. Give me your defensive picks here. Who are you going on the defensive side of the ball? This is just one of those positions that I typically just look for the best value. I don't typically pay the highest for the best matchup, but this week is kind of intriguing. So with the Rams up top in a phenomenal matchup, give me your thoughts here on the defensive things, and then we'll get going, man, so you can get those lineups in.
Yeah. Defenses. So I like the Rams, 3,700. Can't go wrong there, right?
Yeah, they're at home. The biggest favorites. The Cardinals is just not an imposing offense. They do have some weapons, but still, the quarterback play is weak. Aside from Fitzgerald and David Johnson, there's not a ton of strength. I just talked about Ricky Seals-Jones, but it's still a defense that's going to get sacks, going to force turnovers. We saw it last week, and it's just in a good spot. I like the Chargers heading to Buffalo. We saw, the Ravens dominate this offense last week. I know they're traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast, which is concerning, and they had a terrible game last week. They don't have Joey Bosa. I get all that, but this is just a really, really bad Buffalo Bills team, a team that's offensive line is just horrendous. So I do have some interest, in that matchup there. Anyone else? I mean, outside of those top, defenses that if you don't want to pay up that high, where you're kind of like considering this week for your fantasy team for on DraftKings.
I kind of like the Broncos and I like the Jets and Bucks, but that's as of right now, and by Sunday that'll probably change.
I have some interest in the Texans. They're on the road against Tennessee, but like I mentioned before, Tennessee's pretty beat up. This is a defense that's going to get to the quarterback. They're going to force quick passes that can turn into turnovers here. They're only 2,600. I think that's very affordable. I don't think they're going to be utilized a ton here. So it's definitely not a defense I have high, I expect high ownership in. So 2,600 is very interesting for me to choose someone like the Texans that has a lot of talent on the defense side of the ball and can make things happen. What are your final thoughts? Just give the final thoughts here on this slate, how you're approaching it. I know it's Thursday. I know you still have a lot of digging to do, and you're going to have so much more information Sunday for us. But what's your approach this week? You going running back heavy, or are you going receiver heavy?
I'm probably going mix. Can I say that?
Yeah.
I might.
Okay. I agree.
I think I'm going running back heavy.
I think taking a balanced approach this week makes a ton of sense. I don't think there's enough value to go stars and scrubs. There are weeks like last week that there was a ton of value, so you were able to do stars and scrub construction, but I don't think that's going to be the case this week. I'm gonna take a balanced approach. I am going to be mixing in a lot of the receivers and running backs out of my flex. I don't think I'm going tight end like I initially thought, and that's just the way I'm viewing it. Before we go, everyone, please tune in on Sunday. We will be live at 11. We'll be going up to right before 12. I think last week we did 12:30. So just depending, we're going to be going game by game again. We're going to be talking about updates and news, any information that we get from here to then, and it'll be Bobby and I like we do every Sunday. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to doing this every week with you guys. Any final thoughts here before we get off, Bobby?
No, that's pretty much it. Glad to be on. Thanks for having me. Ready to fix what I just did. I don't know what I just did.
You'll be fine. You're going to get those lineups in. You're going to win all the money, and then everyone's going to be doing the same thing. Just run one lineup with the same players in these showdowns and win all the money. Top 150 spots go to you, sir. Hoping that you win. Hoping that you win some good money and get off and go fix those lineups, man.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Take care.